I still want to welcome you to the big story, and indeed a big one we're having, and we're talking about the recent hike, almost 300% for some schools, of tuition fee in especially government-owned universities, irrespective of the directive given by no other, but President Bola Ahmed Tinubu indicated and in insisting that there should be a reversal and no further increase. But while some schools are going ahead, just like OAU that did so just last week. But irrespective of that very directive, nothing seemed to have been done as form of measures by the federal government to deal with that very disregard of the directive of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. All of that is taking center stage on the show today, as much as we're looking at it. But irrespective, we really want you to know that the big story is open up for sponsorship. Just as we go get a lovely message from our sponsors. And we're talking about Benita Gas, located right here in Ughelli, Okokoko, and Warrior and Environs. And when we come back, more discussion centered on the big story for today.
Hey, Willikity, how person want to talk about gas matter? Make Benita gas plant no sit down for him matter. Gas when we say it dey light and last well. Now Benita gas plant na filamo. Gas when the full rich mark pek. Now Benita gas plant na filam, and for any type and size of gas cylinder plus all accessories. Now Benita gas plant na the touch lighter. Now every day now Benita gas plant they open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on top refill matters. Oh yeah, make you visit any Benita gas plant branch. You fit enter inside of Kwisoko off Jakba Road, opposite UBA for PTI Road F, Nehemiah Junction, near former Army checkpoint for Okwokoko, all 101, Ajami Moga Ekpe Road, Warri, or 145, Ughelli Patani Expressway, by Aviation Junction when carry eye, they look Shikiman, and NNPC roundabout for Isoko Road for Sergeant Quarters for Ughelli. For more information, make you call Benita Gas Plant for 080-6745-7890. Benita Gas Plant. Na God, they our back.
Indeed, proud sponsors of the big story right here on Quest today. Anyway, let's continue with the big one, and we're talking about the recent hike in tuition fees by some government-owned university and how that seems also to be impacting negatively on the lives of many Nigerians, and especially parents that are already going through a difficult time at the moment due to the increase or removal of fuel subsidy and the resultant increase in the prices of goods and services. But anyway, like we said, we still have our guest right here, Comrade Emeka Owokocha, helping us to discuss about it. But it's only right we bring somebody that is also close to it. And we're talking about having a lecturer from a government-owned institution join us to have his view on it. And we're talking of no other person but Engineer Dr. Wilfred Okologume. He's joining us via the phone to really look at this. Good morning and welcome to the show, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Mike.
Yeah, nice having you on board as we talk about this. That seems to also be affecting your primary constituents, and we're talking about federal universities. But a quick question before we have your view on all of this increase. Yes, we do know some public or federal-owned universities are increasing their tuition fee. And we also do know that a directive was given by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu just last month. But my quick question to you, two quick questions. Number one, why the increment? And number two, why is it that some schools are disobeying that directive?
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mike. First of all, I appreciate the contribution from your guests in the studio.
Okay.
But it's good we say things the way they are in the right perspective.
Yeah, go ahead.
To the best of my knowledge, no federal university have introduced tuition fees, talk less of increasing tuition fees. What are charged in Nigerian universities, especially government-owned universities, federal particularly, are service charges.
Service
these
charges?
are one of the reasons. Yeah, service charges. Tuition still remains free. If you look at the breakdown of these fees, you see library development, you see different, they are all service charges. It's not tuition fee. Tuition remains free. And these are part of the reason the national leadership of HASU have been clamoring that government needs to fund her public institutions. But the public did not get the perspective. Also recently, we noticed there was a debate about university autonomy, why it's also kicking against it. It's just a tip of the iceberg. Just imagine if government from their plans desist from funding universities. And presently, government is funding universities and increasing service charges because the overheads are not enough to
well, sorry to cut you there, Engineer Dr. Wilfred. I'm a bit amazed that you are saying not tuition fee, but service charge. Now, service charge that directly will come to the universities. Are you saying that's what's happening here? Because parents are confused because they do not understand what service charge is and tuition fee. For them, it's an increment in what they used to pay for their words and children.
Yes. Yes. That's why I'm happy I'm joining this debate.
Okay.
It's good. That's why when I said that, I said it's good we get the perspective right.
Okay.
All along, what parents have been saying, that is why if you notice, the fees are different with regard to all federal institutions.
Okay.
It's not tuition. Tuition remains free for Nigerian citizens. It's only foreign nationals that are schooling in Nigeria.
So are the service charge directly being charged by the different federal institutions?
Yes, yes. These are charges that the students pay for things like library subscriptions. You have that for medical subscriptions. You have that for, okay, accommodation is optional. Accommodation is optional. That's not compulsory, but library, development, those kind of things. These are the funds that the university used to augment what comes from federal government in the form of overhead costs, which is not sufficient. I'll give you a practical example. Imagine a university overhead cost for running diesel for the year at 200,000 naira. Is it possible? No. And that is why some of these universities have this things. And that is one of the reasons ASU was saying, government fund your university adequately. Let university desist from going back to the children of the masses to augment for the funding based on the lapses of government. But when ASU went to that strike, sorry I'm deviating, Nigerians were not seeing it in the perspective. Just like what is happening now, government is coming, giving a circular that stops increment of tuition. But no university in Nigeria, no federal government-owned university has even introduced tuition. So how do you expect that directive, in quote, to be obeyed, where the directive is not addressing what is presently happening?
So are you saying indirectly all of this is happening because of lack of proper funding of the various tertiary institutions? Hence, the school has to do what they feel they need to do to remain afloat.
That is what it is. University provides their own power and not for public power supply, running diesel. And they need funds for that. University provides different stationery. They need funds for that. Government funding is not sufficient for that. That's why you see universities are going otherwise, getting it from the students. Me, as a person, I'm not in support of that model. That's not the truth. But it tells us the systematic failure. Most recently, I think the national president of ASU was on a debate, on an interview in one of your sister stations.
Yes.
When he was asked, why is ASU against full autonomy? You say you want autonomy, you need financial autonomy. And his response was to put it in the right perspective. Autonomy in terms of operation, government still remains the founder and the owner and the proprietor of this institution.
So do you feel...
their infrastructure?
Engineer Dr. Wilfred Okolugume, do you feel now that directive given by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu holds no water because it's only directed to tuition fee and not service charge?
Well, without wanting to be too direct,
yes,
I will speak and react to it since former. That tells you there's a disconnect between those in government with what is actually happening. No federal university charges tuition, it is service charges. Then you are giving a directive for them not to increase tuition. Of course, it's only on paper because it's not practically implementable because what you are saying is not existing.
Well, anyway,
it's a confirmation of the disconnect.
Okay, well,
from what is happening in university.
Okay, now let's leave that, but I would still rather remain with you before I come back to our guests in the studios. Now, basically, like we said before we went on the break, UNESCO recent report indicates that about 20 million Nigerian children are either drop out from schools or out of school children. And most recently, the president of the Parents Teachers Association of Nigeria, and we're talking of no other person but Haruna Abakar, recently said that most of the problem that parents are facing, or rather children are facing, said 67% of all the students in tertiary institutions publicly owned by government are the ones providing those basic things for themselves. And honestly, he talked about prostitution, which we recently call hookup, and also armed robbery as one of the trends that these poor children use to fund themselves in the institution. Well, crime rate is indeed something that we'll definitely be looking at. But I want you to help us understand. Now, if these federal institutions go ahead and increase this service charge, let me call it the name you said it is, are we likely not going to see a high rate of crime? That's number one, in these universities. And number two, are we not going to have more students drop out on account of the service charge being introduced by universities?
All right. Thank you very much. I think this is a very good question. I think Nigeria public needs to understand part of the reasons why those of us in the academy, especially from the union angle, tend to pick and advocate on some things that people will say, how school they do in school. Now, what you just said is this. Education is a right, first of all. It's not a privilege. And it is part of government responsibility to ensure that every citizen, especially from school age, have access to education, not just education, quality education with the right infrastructure and the qualified manpower to train this person.
Of course.
That is one. Government has failed. Number two, bringing you back to what you said, because of this increment in service charges, wouldn't it be possible that some wards will not be going extra bound? That is a definition to also assess that government has failed their parents, because normally a student is not supposed to train himself. He's not supposed to source for the money. The parents are supposed to have the work to do to train the child. So if the pressure is coming back on the student, we therefore means even the government has failed the parents. That's one aspect of it. Also, now the solution, instead of lamenting, there was a time in this nation where a lot of persons, especially those that were not well to do, were getting government bursaries and scholarships. That should be the approach. For those who cannot afford it, should be on government scholarship. Some should be on bursary. For those kids are no longer existing because they have been bastardized. And government have now stayed on that path, making the university want to run. They will not be thinking inward. But the thinking inward should not be about the fees from the student. But of course, that is the only option existing for now. And to give you a different dimension, to give you a different dimension to this also. To give you a different dimension to this, you see the proliferation of universities.
Yes.
You are not able to fund the existing one. We are establishing more like constituency projects. No, it shouldn't be about number. But it should be about quality, not quantity. The few you have, ensure they are meeting up with the requisite international standards. That is what it is. And let me just say this. This shouldn't be a debate just about tertiary education.
Yes.
It cuts across all the value chain. Go to some of our public primary and secondary schools.
Yeah.
You see the students in public primary and secondary school. The students are the ones cutting the grasses in the environment. Are they supposed to do that? No, government is supposed to employ draftsmen to be taking care of those environments. That's another aspect of using students to take care of service delivery, which is wrong. Which is wrong. We cannot use university students now to be cutting grasses. University needs to employ our own draftsmen, gardeners, to be taking care of the lawns.
That's the reason of the service charge.
Because government have failed to provide such funds. That's a typical example. But you don't see that happening in secondary school, because most of the public secondary school will have our children to come with their cutlass and their hose to come and clear the field. You cannot try that model in tertiary institutions. So that's the perspective I want parents and the public to see these things from.
Okay, well,
it's quite alarming that there's a huge disconnect.
I would need to really thank you so much, and I'm talking of Engineer Dr. Wilfred Okulugume, well, for joining us and giving us a total insight into this recent hike in, I won't call it school fees as you've said, but rather service charge being introduced by many federal institutions. Thank you so much. I know how busy you are. You need to be in class, but we needed to drag you out for you to truly help us understand this. We truly appreciate your time with us. Thank you so much, Engineer Dr.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mike. Anytime.
Okay. Well, anyway, you heard from him, and well, irrespective whether it's service charge or school fees hike, the parents are the one feeling the brunt, and it's just basic. But we needed to get his own clarity on the discussion we're having today. But let's look at the impact and solution, because there will be no sense talking extensively on this issue without looking at the impact and the solution. In the 2023 budget, the 21.7 trillion being budgeted or being budgeted for the 2023, only 470 billion was given to universities and other tertiary institutions, which is a far cry from the recommended amount it is. You also said it, that only Nigeria out of all major developing nations seem to fall below the 10% line. But anyway, that is it. But let's look at how really bad it is. What do you feel the government needs to do to better fund our institution? Because all he has said is all about funding. That's the basic. So what do you feel this government needs to do? Mr. Mike,
priority.
Priority.
Priority. Priority. You see, most times I feel pained. It appears, those joining our government do not really understand, where we are going and what governance is all about. I like governance to be, a family thing where the father and the mother ensures the welfare of the children
have been taken care of.
Must be taken care of. And that is what governance is all about. If a child must be born, Mike, the child must be given a head start. And what is the head start? The child must be given education. If you think it is possible, it is important for the child to go to primary school so that the child can learn how to read, then it is important for the child to go to secondary school so that the child can have a better education. Then it is better for the child to go to university. So there is no way you can explain it. So it's all to be at the front burner. The government is supposed to put the money where money should be put. It is not a case of the fact that Nigeria does not have money to fund education. It's a case of
that's what it's turning out to look like.
This country has, let me tell you, some countries, even within the African sub-region, sub-Saharan African sub-region, fund their education at almost 30% of the budgetary allocation. So if the government considers education important, because if you say education is important, that means you have the consciousness to ensure that you train and you build, you groom your citizenry so that they become superstars tomorrow. They cannot become superstars without going to school. They cannot become superstars without learning how to achieve the superstar. So it is not a case where the citizen should be asking or begging the government cap in hand to fund the education. It ought to be a primary responsibility of the government. And let me tell you, Mr. Mike, if the government fails to do this, you have now asked, what are the impacts? The impacts are so many. Even before now, we've had it. About 20 million of Nigerian children are out of school, or rather, cannot go to school. And what do you see in the society today? You are seeing a society that grooms the youths, that do not have interest for education. Why is this so? Because the government has totally disconnected itself from the responsibility of ensuring that every child, it is a compulsory time that every child must get education. Because I do tell you here that it is not a privilege. You are not even doing them any good. You are doing yourself any good, because by tomorrow, if every child is educated and trained, Mr. Mike, you won't spend any money for security purposes. That issue will take care of itself. In Sweden, there's a policy that says no child must be left behind. What does that mean? Every child, not minding your capacity, must go through the 4 walls of the school, quality education. And no matter the pace at which you get the education, if you are the slow learner, there's a design that takes you along that path. But what we are saying, no child must be left behind. At the end of the day, Sweden is benefiting it. They are closing up, correctional centers. They are closing up prisons. There is no crime in Sweden. So these things are achievable. The government is shooting themselves in the foot, as if they don't understand that governance is all about people. The Constitution made it known that the primary responsibility of government is the welfare of the people. And that welfareism we are talking about is an omnibus statement that encompasses every aspect of developmental narrative that could make a child stand firm to be able, to eke out a living when he or she becomes an adult.
Well, anyway, I'll plead with you. We need to get on with our own living, and when I mean pay our bills. So we'll go on a break now. But when we come back, we'll continue our discussion centered on this. And we're talking about the recent hike in tuition. Oh, sorry.
In whatever you call it.
Charges.
Because what the ordinary Nigerian understand is school fees. Anyway, school fees at the end of it, the parents are still paying.
Yeah, so we'll come to talk more about the service charge being introduced by many tertiary institutions and what needs to be done. Let's go on a break.